Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We're going to talk quite a bit about the rookie minicamp that was held over the weekend, along with all of our draft picks fresh off the NFL draft just a couple of weeks ago, and some things that we were hearing. We've got a couple of additional signings to talk about, a couple of releases as well, not too significant, but just thought we'd throw that out there to get everybody up to date. Welcome in.
Yeah, sorry, timing. This was a fun weekend. Now, Seahawks had the largest rookie minicamp they've probably ever had because, the 10 draft picks plus the 27 undrafted free agents plus another 8 guys that I know of that were there for tryouts. So that is a lot of bodies all in place, all learning the system for the first time and going through the stuff. But there were definitely some standouts.
Yeah. It is beginning to learn the system, but more so just going through the motions to see kind of physically how everyone shows up, how everyone's standing out a little bit, learning some of the personalities of the guys, the way they like to learn, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just really kind of nice to be able to study a whole bunch of guys for a long period of time as an organization, and then to have them all land in one spot all at the same time. It's pretty exciting stuff. When Pete Carroll had their press conference, post minicamp press conference, all that kind of stuff, they're just very excited to be able to see these guys firsthand. We also had press conferences from a number of different players that kind of gave some insights on their enthusiasm and their expectations coming in and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty cool to see, really. You'd mentioned some standouts. What do you got?
Well, I think one of the standouts that kind of was the center, Oluwatimi, which I probably butchered that, but
you got it. Yeah.
Okay. Is that the Seahawks coaches were really dumping a lot of praise on how quickly he picked up the offense and the different concepts that they were trying to install, and that stuff. And he basically, multiple coaches were talking about how you can tell he's, that long-term center, like he knows his job. He knows blocking alignments, and he knows those kind of things. And so it came naturally to him to just, here's not just what I have to do, but what everyone should be doing. And he just picked everything up really quick. And that is a fantastic sign, because usually, talking about a center, you need a guy to have some time to learn all this stuff, because the responsibilities that the center has are far greater than blocking someone. And the sooner they can get all that other stuff into their head, the sooner they can get on the field.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. Basically, that he came in right away, commanded the huddles, the group sessions, and so forth. Looked really good out there. Was excited to be here. If you listen to his press conference, you can immediately tell the guy is very smart and just a well-rounded player. Got his head in the right spot. Wants to take this job, but he knows it's not going to be given to him. It's a great attitude to come in with. I heard the same thing over and over again with Mike Morris, the other player from Michigan, the edge player, 5th round pick, number 151 overall, went 3 picks ahead of Oluwatimi. And quite a tribute to Harbaugh there for coaching these guys up. But you heard nothing but good things from Mike Morris when he stepped to the podium as well. He was giving credit to his past coaches, to players around him. He was excited to get into the system. He just separated himself a little bit, I think, from another group of players especially on the defensive line. Guy, not only physically, guy's 6'6", almost 300 pounds. Looks like he has the frame, Keith, to add another 10 pounds.
He does.
Considering where they want to play him. Wouldn't doubt if he comes into camp in July, closer to 310.
I think they said
and
that
it
he
looks like
weighed in at
he's
304
oh wow,
when he weighed into camp.
wow,
And the other defensive tackle, the nose tackle that they took, came in at 320. So
yeah.
he's booked up too. So they've got both these guys about where they want them. They want, they wanted both the guys to bulk up and to be
I
a
have
little bigger.
I have an interesting question for you.
Hmm.
So, from both of those guys, listening to them at their press conference, they were both seemed like they were asked to do this around the combine,
Mm-hmm.
in private meetings and so forth, almost as if these guys were told that the Seahawks were going to draft them because they said, they asked us to bulk up, both of them. They asked us to bulk up, eat, etc., get bigger. This is where we want to play you. And so we did, and here I am.
Well,
And I
the
don't
thing
think
is
that's a
that
coincidence.
no, Morris actually said so. In this last weekend, like at the minicamp, like he was talking to reporters and he said that the Seahawks coaches said, get yourself up to 300 and we'll draft you. So he did. And then they did.
Yeah.
Um,
And I guess
and
his agent and him were in discussions the morning of the draft or on day 2 about, get yourself a scale, weigh yourself, and send me the text so I can send the Seahawks the text because they're going to be on the clock soon. And, I just found that fascinating because no promises are made usually to players that,
mm-mm.
you hear that in the NBA a few, times now and again that a player, somebody's going to draft you if you last till 7 or whatever. But you don't see that or you don't hear about that much in the NFL. And I found it just very interesting that players were asked to specifically um, gain weight to play a certain position in the NFL because a certain team is going to draft you.
Well, I think part of it is that it's not just that a certain team, but I think it's like, okay, so the NFL views me as a nose tackle. Not as a 3 tech. So I need to put on the weight so I can do it. And yeah, it's the Seahawks going, hey, get yourself up to this weight and we'll draft you. But that doesn't mean that someone else isn't going to draft them. It also doesn't mean that the Seahawks were the only ones to tell them, we see you as a nose
That's true.
tackle, put some weight on. Um, but it just so happens that it worked out that Seattle goes, hey, put this weight on and we'll draft you. And then they did put the weight on and Seattle did draft them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's fascinating. So, other picks, Devon Witherspoon and Jaxon-Smith and Jigba did not really work out. They went through some motions. They did some walkthroughs, etc. Stepped up to the podium, had their time in front of the mic, but they were precautious with these guys around hamstring type stuff, and just were kind of easing them into it. And Jigba said, "Hey, my hamstring's perfect, 100%. I feel great." And clearly, the team's just kind of taking their time. They said, "No worries, this isn't going to be a long-term deal." So they didn't really have a chance to show, but they went ahead and participated anyway. Jerrick Hall came in, looked good. Zach Charbonnet had some good reps. The team's also impressed with Anthony Bradford, the way that he showed up. Big guy. And
Ginormous guy.
exactly. And the way that the offensive line looked and worked together was impressive to Pete Carroll. Obviously, other folks need to be impressed because Pete sometimes goes into these news conferences after these practices and everything is positive and everything looks great. So, but it's fun. Anybody else stand out for you?
Um, it's hard for the linemen to truly stand out in these because there's no pads. It's more about, do the offensive linemen get to the right spot at the right time? Do the defensive linemen get to their spot at the right time? But there's not a lot of pushing and whatever. It's just, here, I need to be here, so I'm going to be. Um, where you see guys that actually are out there learning, competing, like more than just going through the motions is on the outside, like in the secondary. And Jerrick Reed, the 6th round safety, came in and looked the part, looked good, had command over everything they asked him to do, kind of stood out defensively as one of the better players. And Pete Carroll heaped on the praise.
John Snyder did too.
It felt a little bit like Pete Carroll was sending a message. The way he talked about Reed and everything, he's telling guys like Diggs and Adams, come in ready.
Yeah. And
ready.
Love and Kobe Bryant. I mean, all those guys play in the slot. He's got some of that in him as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He said that Quandre Diggs hit him up in the night of the draft. He texted me. He said he and Tariq Woolen and Jamal Adams and Mike Jackson all work with the same defensive backs coach in Texas, Clay Mack. So all of us were very well connected. That doesn't surprise me that they would draft somebody that's already kind of integrated within their system, within the guys that they already know really well and trust. And I'm sure that they got some feedback on this player and so forth. So that's very interesting to me.
I think it goes both ways. You have that, but then you also have the Seahawks are interested. We know that Brian Flo, the area scout that scouted him, that just pounded the table for this kid.
Yeah.
You knew the Seahawks loved him. That guy was going to fight, to make sure the Seahawks drafted him. Probably didn't hurt to have that connection to get in with, the coach that Tariq Woolen and company work out with in the off season. So it probably went both ways.
Yeah. Interesting. The other player that I think stood out a lot was Cameron Young. We'd already talked about how those guys put on some weight and came in, and Cameron Young came in at 320 pounds. And then also Pete talked about a couple of guys that they brought in as well to compete there with him. And I thought that was interesting. Both Robert Cooper, the undrafted rookie free agent from Florida State, and Jonah Tavai from San Diego State. Let's see. Cooper is listed at 6'1", 309, while Tavai is listed at 5'10", 283, but reportedly came in a little heavier than that. Kind of a bowling ball type shape. But, when you looked at Tavai's background and his playmaking ability, he had started 34 of 48 college games, kind of just put himself into the backfield, frequent harasser of quarterbacks, finished second in the country with 63 pressures and finished with 10 and a half sacks in 2022, followed up by an impressive junior year with 57 tackles for loss, equally dominating against the run, kind of an under the radar player playing at San Diego State. And then he had the, measurables at 5'10", 283, 29-inch arms, ran a 5+ 40. So teams, he just kind of dropped out of the draft process, and he was going to be an undrafted guy. But you think about a guy like Poona Ford, who was equally productive.
Exactly who I thought of.
Equally productive in college, but lacked the measurables, quote unquote, to come in and play right away.
It's defensive tackles who are 5'11". The NFL doesn't draft them, and I know that Aaron Donald was short too, but he's 6'1". And so he dropped in the draft because of his height. But honestly, you look at technique, and guys that are a little shorter have natural leverage. They can get under the pads of the guard and center that they're fighting against. And I don't see why it's such a negative, as long as they've got long enough arms to make it work. And Poona Ford certainly has made it work as an undrafted free agent. And Tavai kind of has. I mean,
he does have 29-inch arms.
Yeah, he's a smaller player, and he's got shorter arms, and so he's got a much larger task in order to get on the team and make an impact. But at the same time, like, he was really productive.
Now, Poona came from Texas, correct?
He did.
So this guy's coming from San Diego State, Mountain West Conference. um, you're gonna be facing a superior competition here in the NFL. So you have to be able to make that transition. And this is what these chances are for. Undrafted free agents, come in, prove your stuff, come into camp, compete against your own guys on your own team, have a shot in a couple of preseason games, see how you do. Maybe the team keeps you around. Maybe they think you need some time, put you on the practice squad for a season, and then you've got your opportunity. That's how things like that happen in the NFL. It's just kind of crazy, but guys like that are built to take advantage of these opportunities, and that could be one, considering how light the defensive tackle room is for the Seahawks.
Yeah. Yeah. They did add Austin Faoliu
Yeah,
after the camp. He was a guy that was invited not as a rostered guy, but as a tryout, and impressed enough that he is now on the roster. They
signed him to a contract.
signed him to a contract, cut someone in order to get him onto that contract. So clearly he did something right
Yeah,
over the weekend.
former
I could
Oregon Duck.
Yep, I couldn't tell you what it was that he did right because we're not privy of that information, but he impressed the right people. Um, he's the guy that played for the XFL Seattle Sea Dragons.
Hmm.
Um, and so he's in shape and all of that because he's coming off, their season just ended not that long ago. But he's only 24, young guy, and will come in and have a shot to, make a roster
He
if he can.
originally he
What?
originally came through the NFL draft combine in 2021. Ended up going
Hmm.
undrafted. Spent some time with the Dallas Cowboys in their camp. Got cut. Ended up going to the XFL, as you said, Seattle Sea Dragons. Originally with the Oregon Ducks in college, 113 total tackles, 6 sacks during his time in Eugene. So a little bit of production there. 6'3", 305 is his
Hmm.
current weight. Came into the at the combine, around 293. So he has put on a little bit of weight. So it's just another guy to add to the pile, and we'll see. Pete Carroll has said over and over again that they aren't done addressing that spot, and then they sign him. Mario Edwards, the defensive end, was added to the pile as well, signed as a free agent yesterday, I believe, to come in and Pete Carroll believes that he's going to be part of a 4 or 5 man rotation on the defensive line. He's going to be that important and that integral to their plans. That'll be interesting to see. He is a productive guy, has a decent pass rush win rate, comparable to the player that we just signed from Denver earlier in the offseason as well. And then they also signed they signed nose tackle Forrest Merrill as well, who's been around a little bit, and he's another guy that's going to add to that defensive tackle, nose tackle pile. So it sounds like they're kind of adding the competition in for Cameron Young, but
Hmm.
the expectation is that Cameron Young is still at the top of the heap right now. We'll see what happens as time progresses this summer. If Seattle looks at the players that have been released, and when they get into camp, maybe they go through training camp and they go into the regular season. Cameron Young is their player, but they go pick somebody else off or make a low level trade for somebody if they're not
I wouldn't
completely satisfied with their roster.
I wouldn't be surprised to see one of the corners like Trey Brown or Kobe Bryant, someone who is falling down the depth chart simply because other guys they just drafted Witherspoon, who's I'm sorry everyone, but he's already the starter.
Right.
Um, like he like
and
there's
and
that's
Jerrick
just.
Reed is already turning heads.
Yeah, and so they've got some young guys. Treek Woolen, of course, is an all pro on the other side as a rookie, which is so rare. Um, you've got um, you've got some young guys that are stepping in and taking roles away from people, and you've got some other guys, you know, that are you know possibly tradable. If the Seahawks can get a pick for um, Trey Brown and or a defensive lineman, I if they get through the preseason and everything with these guys healthy, you got some of these guys that'll never see the field simply because of the depth in the secondary. So why not trade it for a person that is, going to help you at a position where it's not quite as deep. And I could totally see them
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
And even if they can't get a guy like that, there's still the possibility of the trade, and they'll just take a draft pick for it because they love this upcoming draft.
I'll just go through a few other players that I think that they that stood out and the Seahawks really have an eye on for at least going through training camp with, and that's running back Chris Smith. He's got some good return ability as well. Signed a $6,500 bonus to
Yeah, but
sign on with the team.
He's gonna have to beat out Kenny McIntosh, who had.
Yeah, but that's if we carry 4 running backs. We've carried 5 in the past, and who knows how they're going to classify Nick Ballore.
But McIntosh had a good camp.
Yeah,
showed
they love him.
He showed. I mean, I get that like his measurables at the combine were terrible, but he is a very competent pass catcher. Runs like a wide receiver, catches the ball like a wide receiver. Just a huge catch radius. They love him, and they're going to love him.
Don't discount the fact that he runs tough. He's a tough runner too.
He's not very big though.
Well, he's 209, 6. He's 5'11", 209. So he's not small, Keith.
Okay, I thought he was like 201.
Yeah, he's a decent sized guy. And if you take a look at the film and you take a look at Zach Charbonnet, there are some out there that had Kenny McIntosh rated ahead of Zach Charbonnet. As far as the running back ratings in this class, I'm not saying everybody. I'm just saying that there were some.
That's crazy.
And if you go look at his skill set is unique on this team. He's got the ability to run between the tackles, similar to DJ Dallas. He's got the ability, but do you really want him to do that all the time? Probably not. But as a complementary back, he blows DJ Dallas away as far as his skills catching the ball. You had mentioned it. He's a wide receiver.
Oh yeah,
in a running back body. He can catch the ball and do some damage out in open space. He's not going to break away from you if he does get into open space, but he has that ability to find space, get himself open with his agility, and then get to the second level. And he's going to make the roster. I think he's going to be the third running back on the field for this team over DJ Dallas. I think eventually.
I don't expect that at all. I expect him to be a special teams guy this year. He's going to be our special teams player, and unless there's a lot of injuries, he's going to have a hard time seeing the field with the offense. But
don't discount this kid, Keith.
That's it's just this year, and he'll get his chances. But I just know that you're going to see Walker in that third down role this year, so that way it gets him the reps that he deserves. But also gives him a chance to get Charbonnet on the field more. I really expect you're going to see Walker in that third down role, which is going to make it hard.
You got to put your best player on the field, and Walker's definitely that guy. There's no question. But Kenny McIntosh, I think by the end of the year, could have work himself into that as far as being a specialist on this team.
Especially if there's injuries. That's my thought is.
And there always is.
They're gonna dress 3 running backs on game day, and it's going to be the 2 at the top, Walker and Charbonnet, and then it's probably going to be Dallas because he's the most versatile
and experienced.
Yeah,
and he doesn't put the ball on the ground.
Yeah,
he's good that way.
And so all of those things point to DJ Dallas being the backup, but one injury above him, any of those 3 guys, we're talking about a position that takes a freaking beating every week. But one injury above him, and McIntosh is now getting reps with the offense, and they'll adjust roles to make sure that he gets them on third down because he's a type of player that should be getting them. He is a wide receiver in a running back body. He runs like a wide receiver. His ability to adjust to poorly thrown passes is kind of crazy. I mean, he had Stetson Bennett as a quarterback, so he's good at adjusting to poorly thrown passes. And honestly, you never expect a 7th round pick. You don't just go into the offseason saying, "Oh, our 7th round pick is definitely making the roster." it does kind of feel like a foregone conclusion that this guy's on the roster.
Yeah. Well, A, the running back room wasn't great before the draft, and B,
True.
the kids probably could have been picked in the 4th round and we wouldn't have batted an eye. Especially if we hadn't taken Charbonnet ahead.
Oh,
If
yeah.
he's sitting there in the 4th round, we draft Kenny McIntosh, we would have just been, yeah, that makes sense. The fact that we got him in the 7th round and that value, I think is really significant. I like this kid a lot. I think that he's going to be pressing right away, DJ Dallas. And we'll see how training camp works out and how preseason games work out. There's always a kid that's going to impress, pile up the yards and stats in preseason, and then doesn't make the active roster, is cut or whatever. And we're like, what's going on? He could definitely be that kid. Cause I do have to hand it to you. You made a legit argument for DJ Dallas getting those reps, at least at the beginning of the season. And we'll see how that goes. Go ahead.
One other thing that came out of this is I may have a new favorite coach to watch during training camp.
Oh, yeah?
For the longest time, I loved watching Chris Richard. He was, as a defensive backs coach, watching him teach. And then, Ken Norton Jr., when he was a linebacker coach before he became the defensive coordinator, also just a good teacher, good motivator. But Chris Richard was great with the fine little tiny details and the way that he coached and the way that he got players to really kind of buy in and do the little things that he was asking them to do and the tiny little adjustments that he was making between reps. Those guys aren't here, and I've kind of been like last year's training camp was less fun because I didn't have a coach that I could just watch and just know that I was learning something watching them coach. Now that Andy Dickerson is the offensive line coach.
I was hoping you'd say him.
Not running game coordinator and offensive line assistant, but truly the offensive line coach. Him getting in there, working with guys like Oluwatimi and
look what he did last year.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
And you got two more guys this year in a similar situation.
And honestly, like it's hard to tell at this point because they're not wearing, they don't have pads on it, so we don't know if Bradford's going to actually hold up against speed rushers or any of that kind of stuff. But in terms of guys getting to their spots, being where they need to be, being smart, learning the system quickly,
technique,
it kind of looks like the Seahawks may have got 2 more starters this year in the draft. Maybe not day 1 starters, but week 6, have both of them starting on that offensive line along with the 2 the 2 sophomores, and then Lewis, who's still on his rookie contract too. That is going to be a young defense or offensive line, but it's going to be a good offensive line.
Wow.
And they've got a coach. They've really he's fun to watch. He's fun
absolutely
to watch.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you're dead on that. Very excited about that. I think that you take a look at what they did last year with the tackles. Now they've got an opportunity to do that on the interior now. Build a line that's literally made up of first and second year players plus Lewis to kind of anchor that thing is the potential and could be the reality. Now you've got Evan Brown in there that's not going to give up that center spot. He's earned an opportunity to start in the NFL, and he got it when he signed that free agent deal for Seattle. But they went and signed one of the best centers in all of college football last year, and potentially the best fit for the Seahawks. And it's going to be a competition, and neither player is going to go down easy on that thing. And I'm here for it. I mean, that's going to be one of the best competitions I think in camp to look forward to.
That interior line, and then you got Haynes in there, you've got Lewis in there. These are guys that are fighting for a job. And nothing's going to be given to anybody, not the rookies, not the veterans.
Yeah. And you got guys like Curhan too that aren't going to lay down. They want their opportunity too. They've been biding their time. They thought maybe they'd get a chance this year. And then now they've got some rookies that they're going to come in and, just be handed a job. No way. That guy's coming in to fight.
Mm-hmm. And so their offensive line has a chance to have gone from this just pathetic weakness for years into being one of the strengths of this team.
Yeah.
And
Could be the second strongest unit.
you
Well,
know that
gosh, I don't know. But
I'm excited for that.
yeah. I mean, you take
Just
a
for
look
the
at the
Seahawks to have for
defensive
the Seahawks to have a
backs.
good offensive line is like, oh my God, like I've never seen this. It's been since 2013, since the Super Bowl year,
It's pretty
that
exciting
they've had a
stuff,
competent
Keith.
offensive line.
It's pretty exciting. So you take a look at the defensive backs, and you're just like, well, we're at least the best defensive backs group in the division. We could be the best
Oh,
defensive
easy.
backs groups in the NFC, possibly the entire NFL. We don't know yet. We've got to integrate what we've got, but let's find out. You take a look at the wide receiver room. We added Njigba to DK
Mm-hmm.
Metcalf and Tyler Lockett.
Top
What?
3 wide
Top
receivers.
three.
It's hard. I mean, Miami's going to have something to say about that, but find me a set of good, mostly young wide receivers. Okay, they're 3 deep. The rest of the is a lot of very unknowns, but the top 3 are elite.
Yeah. And then you look at the running backs.
Mm-hmm.
You could say something very similar to that.
Yeah.
You take a look at our tight end group. We're solid.
Mm-hmm.
It's solid. It's a solid group, and it might not be the top, but it's solid. Say it's second best in the NFC West, anyway. And then the defensive line, I think, is underrated. It's certainly weak at nose tackle, but the defensive end and edge group is solid. If you take a look at players 1 through 7, it's a pretty decent group. Linebackers, Bobby Wagner, Brooks when healthy, Devin Bush. That linebacker group right there is definitely probably top 5 in the NFC, if not higher. If you
I don't agree with that.
No, come on now. Bobby Wagner was an all-pro level play last year. Yeah, he diminished a little bit, but Keith, he was making plays, playing well last year.
Lewis also isn't. Brooks isn't going to be back
He led the
until
league in tackles last year.
Brooks isn't going to be back until mid-season, and Bush, if he returns to his pre-injury athleticism, was a steal. Or they got it. If he doesn't, then he's a waste of a roster spot.
Yeah.
And there's no depth there at all. So I don't agree with the middle. I think middle linebacker is a place for major concern. And I'm not talking about Bobby Wagner, even though he's getting old and has lost a couple steps and has diminished some. He's still the strongest of the group by far. And that's saying a lot because what's behind him is pretty weak, considering Brooks is hurt.
And then safety.
Safety, they're strong at safety. This is strong a great safety team.
So, overall, Keith, I mean, our roster is starting to stack up against anybody, really.
I'm starting. I've been on the Jamal Adams trade, since the season ended.
They're sure trying hard to keep him.
They're working really hard to keep him, and I could see if he's healthy at the end of the preseason and ready to go, and he got injured so early last year, he should be. But if he's healthy at that point, I'm sure he stays. But if he's not, if he just can't get on the field to practice during training camp in the preseason, that's a lot of money to pay a guy that isn't going to produce anything for you. I could see them deciding, we're not going to stick him on injured reserve again and pay him again for doing nothing. Let's cut him loose. I could see them doing that.
Interesting.
Especially if Reed comes in and does what we expect him to do.
A couple more players I want to mention before we get out of here. Long snapper Chris Stoll doesn't have a lot of competition. I didn't hear his name this weekend for a long snapper. That's good news. So, he's still on the roster at this point. We didn't hear about him. He's good to go as far as I'm concerned. Christian Young, the safety from Arizona, Brugler, top ranked safety, undrafted rookie free agent. At 6'1", 229, 6'1", 221, ran a 4.59. 40, didn't test very well, but he's going to get an opportunity here. They like him, I understand.
His size, and he hits hard, and the special teams coach is going to be pounding the table for a guy like that.
Yeah, in his career, he had 106 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 8 pass breakups, and 2 fumble recoveries, 2 forced fumbles. Very physical guy, going to put his nose in there, not afraid of contact, going to set the tone for your defense. I think they really like this kid. It's something to watch. Wide receiver CJ Johnson, I guess, impressed. Brugler's 30th ranked receiver in the class, had a 6th round grade. comes in at 6'1", 224, big guy, slower, but seems to fight for the ball, high point the ball, good red zone target, gets open essentially. And the other kid I thought is interesting is Griffin Herbert. They list him as a tight end, but he's almost like a fullback. And they may transition him into a fullback. Now, Seattle hasn't traditionally used a fullback. There are fullbacks in this offense. I think the 49ers are prime example of using a fullback in the offense that we run. So it can work. I don't know if there's a spot for him or whatever, but he's 6'1", 239, runs a 4.56 40 and a 1.58 10-yard split. And you know,
it's not a fast 40, but that split's pretty good.
Yeah, split's good. He's got
good acceleration, even if he doesn't have long speed.
And Holton Allers is a guy.
Holton Allers is fun. He's a fun guy. He's a fun story. We're gonna love watching him in training camp in the preseason.
If he goes through training camp. You know, sometimes this time of the year, you never know. They kind of come and go, quarterbacks wise, off and on the 90-man roster. But I think he's a guy that they want to kind of take a look at for an extended period of time.
I think so too. And someone else is going to have to become available that they were like, whoa, how is this guy available, in order for them to move on from Allers before training camp. Pete Carroll came out and was just talking about him and about how he threw 61 touchdown passes, you know, in a year in high school. And he's like, who does that? And then he ran for 14 or 15 more. Like, he's got a tremendous arm, can throw, the whole make all the throws. And he can more than make all the throws. He's got a cannon.
Yeah.
And he's extremely accurate. The problem is that it takes about 6 months for the ball to come out of his hand, because his windup is like a pitcher. It's just the whole body, and it takes forever. But eventually, when the ball comes out of his hand, great things happen. And that kind of situation, as far as his mechanics, never bodes well. But he's the type of guy that can come in and do some fun things, and they can put him to work. Put him on the practice squad, put him to work with a specialist who can help him fix mechanics. And maybe a year from now, after spending a year on the practice squad, he could fight lock for that backup job. And Pete, like I said, Pete loves him. He's a lefty, but he's big. He's a big guy. He'll be hard to tackle.
Yeah.
And he runs well too. So I wouldn't count him out. I just wouldn't. I think that he has a shot to
at least a practice squad guy.
Make the practice squad, and then if they can fix his mechanics, he might have an NFL career.
All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. We'll have more information as time goes on about all these guys, but limited opportunity to watch them, to listen to them, and read about them over the weekend. But it's just the start. It's exciting times, and we're going to have OTAs start up soon, and we'll hear more from the rest of the roster coming up in shows that'll be out soon. I think our next show is going to be a look at our 2023 NFL schedule. We'll kind of go through that and evaluate maybe where the wins and losses can come from this year. So exciting to go through that for sure. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. You can find the show at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. You can find us at Seahawks Playbook on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. And make sure you hit that subscribe button. I think we're almost up to 2,000 subscribers, Keith, on our YouTube channel. So that thing continues to grow. We're excited about that too. So
awesome.
Yeah. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWCHawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.